Let's take you to the United Nations headquarters in New York, where the Secretary General is speaking.
Palestinians in Gaza are enduring what may be the cruelest phase of this cruel conflict. For nearly 80 days, Israel blocked the entry of life-saving international aid. As the world's leading hunger assessment found, the entire population of Gaza is facing the risk of famine. Families are being starved and denied the very basics, all with the world watching in real time. Israel has clear obligations under international humanitarian law. It must treat civilians humanely, with respect for their inherent dignity. It must not forcibly transport, deport, or displace the civilian population of an occupied territory. And as the occupying power, it must agree to allow and facilitate the aid that is needed. Finally, a trickle of aid has crossed over. In recent days, almost 400 trucks were cleared for entry to Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing. But supplies from only 115 trucks have been able to be collected, and nothing has reached the besieged north. We are working around the clock to get whatever aid we can to people in need. And we managed to distribute some wheat, flour, baby food, nutrition supplements, and medicines. At long last, a few bakeries in South and Central Gaza are operating. But let us not forget that we are operating in the middle of a military operation. In any case, all the aid authorized until now amounts to a teaspoon of aid when a flood of assistance is required. The needs are massive and the obstacles are staggering. Strict quotas are being imposed on the goods we distribute, along with unnecessary delay procedures. Other essentials, including fuel, shelter, cooking gas, and water purification supplies, are prohibited. We continue to request for safety and security mitigation measures to be in place for our convoys. Our staff life is at risk if we continue to be prevented from distributing food parcels and wheat flour directly to people in desperate need. Without those, and in the absence of the rule of law and the desperate population after months of blockade and totally insufficient supply entering, the risk of security incidents and looting remains high. Meanwhile, the Israeli military offensive is intensifying with atrocious levels of death and destruction. Today, 80% of Gaza has been either designated an Israeli militarized zone or an area where people have been ordered to live. In other words, 4/5 of the territory of Gaza is a no-go zone for the people of Gaza. And so, beyond questions about the particular number of trucks at any particular moment, it is important to stay fixed on the big picture. And the big picture is that without rapid, reliable, safe, and sustained aid access, more people will die, and the long-term consequences on the entire population will be profound. The United Nations has been clear. We will not take part in any scheme that fails to respect international law and the humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, independence, and neutrality. And we have been equally clear about what is needed: a permanent ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and full humanitarian access. The United Nations and our partners have a detailed, principled, operationally sound 5-stage plan supported by member states to get aid to a desperate population. A mechanism to ensure the delivery of aid to Gaza, inspect and scan aid at crossing points, transport aid from crossing points to humanitarian facilities, prepare aid for onward distribution, and transport aid to people in need. We have the personnel, the distribution networks, the systems and community relationships in place to act. The supplies 160,000 pallets, enough to fill nearly 9,000 trucks, are waiting. This is my appeal for life-saving aid for the long-suffering people of Gaza. Let's do it right, and let's do it right away. Thank you. Sorry.
Families are being starved, all with the world watching in real time. The words there of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres speaking at the United Nations headquarters as he went on to criticize Israel, saying Israel had blocked all aid for nearly 80 days, and as the occupying power, it actually had an obligation to facilitate aid. Let's go to our correspondent, Gabriel Elizondo, who's at the UN headquarters in New York. He joins us from there, and clearly from his comments, Gabriel, it's clear he's not satisfied with the level of trucks which have been allowed in just the last couple of days or so, right?
Clearly, the UN has been calling for at least 500 to 600 trucks of aid going into Gaza immediately. That's what was happening during the ceasefire period. But we just heard from the Secretary General, 400 trucks have been cleared to enter Gaza, but only 115 have been collected by the UN because of the security situation. It's incredibly complicated. As the Secretary General said there, no aid has been distributed at all in the north of the Gaza Strip. So we're talking about 115 trucks. This is nothing, quite frankly. As the Secretary General said, this is like a teaspoon of aid when much, much more is needed. So essentially, the blockade of aid into Gaza, essentially, in all practical terms, is still very much in place by Israel. The Secretary General also saying, beyond measuring or counting the number of trucks, he said the big picture is that more people will die in Gaza without the unobstructed flow of aid entering the besieged strip immediately.
And Gabriel, he also, I think it was clear he was talking also about the Israeli modality or alternative aid distribution plan that the U.S. has been trying to push as a rebranded U.S. plan, when he said we're not going to take part in any scheme which doesn't respect international law.
That's right. UN officials have been saying that for about a week now, and you just heard the Secretary General saying it again, that they will not take part in any sort of scheme that is contrary to the principles of neutrality. And this is important for the UN. This Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, as it's so called by the Israelis and the Americans, is clearly doesn't prescribe to the UN principles of neutrality. So that you heard the Secretary General say right there, we will not take part in it. He said, and he held up a document. He said, we have a plan in place. We have been delivering aid for years now in Gaza, and we have shown, he said, and other officials have said, the UN has shown how they can deliver aid if there is a ceasefire. So clearly the UN will not participate with any aid distribution that the Israelis or Americans are talking about through this so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation.
And Gabriel also put his finger on no-go zones and talked about the obligation of an occupying power not to transfer the population, an indication of what he thinks and many think that the ultimate plan is to transfer the population out.
Yeah, that's right. We've heard the Secretary General say this before, but he again reaffirmed it very early on in his remarks, saying, repeating again, reminding the world again that Israel has clear obligations under international law as the occupying power to not only provide aid to the population that they are occupying, but also not to forcibly displace any population as well. I mean, we've heard this before, but I think you're sensing some real frustration, not only with the Secretary General, but with other UN officials, that their calls have so far gone unheeded by the Israelis. But clearly you're seeing the Secretary General once again calling out to the world to do whatever they can, whatever nations have leverage, to use that leverage on Israel right now.
All right. Thanks so much to our correspondent there at the United Nations headquarters in New York, Gabriel Elizondo.